Hey guys, welcome back to my Absolute Beginner's Guide to Kerbal Space Program. You can see that I have my spacecraft already on the launch pad. So this is basically my default heavy lifter, which I've outlined in my previous videos. And then on top we've got this sort of little symmetrical rendezvous system spacecraft here. It's just got a lander can and a Kerbal container, and then some RCS fuels, an RCS thruster, an ASAS, and then a little adapter on both sides, and then docking ports on the ends. So above us, we already have the space station, which we're going to be rendezvousing with. It's basically just a space station core that's pretty similar to what I've already got on the launch pad. It's a little bit different. And it's in a circular 100-kilometer orbit. So you can see that right now it's at about 99 kilometers. Apoapsis, I think, is about 100 kilometers. So, but if we launched right now, we would not be able to very quickly catch up in orbit with this space station, because we would have to launch into a lower orbit, and then we have to just basically sit there and wait for the faster lower orbit to catch up. And that would take a lot of orbits, especially since we're under 120 kilometers. We wouldn't be able to time warp very fast. So what we're going to do is time warp forward. And you can pretty much do unlimited time warp while you're still on the ground. I'm not going to go too fast, or else it's just going to fly by. Go up to 100. And we're going to wait for it to pass by us, so that it's just slightly ahead of us in orbit. So that's pretty good right there. And you can see that its orbit is basically going straight over Kerbal Space Center, so it's on a 0-degree inclination. If it was on any different of an inclination, you would have to launch into that inclination orbit, but we're going to keep it simple for now, and we're going to be at a 0-degree inclination for our target orbit. So, we're going to launch. I'm going to basically just fast forward, and then I'll pick it back up from our circular orbit. Okay, so you can see that our periapsis is 80,000 meters and our apoapsis is about 84,000 meters. That is close enough. The entire orbit is below our target orbit. So the first thing I'm going to do, once I'm circularized, is hit set as target on, hopefully the target, if I can actually get to it. That debris is pretty close. It's only going to let me do the debris for now, but that's fine because it's pretty close to the actual target that we're going for. So now we've got our target set. You can see that we have an ascending node and a descending node. Both say that we're about 0.3 degrees from matching our inclination. So the first thing that I'm going to do before I fast forward to try to really catch up is go forward to whatever the closest node is. In this case it's the ascending node. And we're going to do a small burn to match the inclination. You can see that they kind of switch there. Should be 0, yes. So it's only going to be a 12 meter per second burn. Not too bad. Fast forward to that point. And the entire time that we're doing this, we're catching up with the forward spacecraft anyway, so. Alright, let me give myself a little bit of time to figure out where that maneuver node target is. Let's turn a little bit slowly. Let me turn on RCS. There we go. This is wiggling a lot. Come on. Alright, so we get the burn coming up in just a couple seconds. Fast forward a little bit, and this is a big engine to be doing this burn, but not too big of a deal. That should be pretty good. Yep, so now our inclination is 0, so we're now on a 0-degree inclination relative to our target orbit. Now we can fast forward. I'm going to fast forward in-game and probably in the video through the miracle of editing. Okay, so now I'm under 100 kilometers away from the target vehicle. You can see at the very bottom it says Space Station Hub, distance 98,000 meters. So now I'm going to do another burn. That burn is going to basically be a little tiny Hohmann transfer. I'm going to ellipticalize? Eccentricize? I'm not sure what the verb is, but I'm going to make my orbit elliptical so that it matches up on the end of the orbit to my target orbit. So through the the next half of that ellipse, I'm gonna eventually be at a point that matches the target orbit point. So let me just set up a hello. Set up a maneuver node a little. Oh my god. Set up a maneuver node. And that's actually way too much, you can see. So I'm going to bring it down. Now I've got the intersect markers, which I would have liked to have had before, but for some reason they weren't showing. Alright, so pretty much my closest approach is going to be at 32 kilometers. Once your orbits either intersect or are tilted against each other, it's going to show those target intercept markers, which I'll show you in a second as soon as I get this burn in. If I can move this lumbering spacecraft. See, I really don't like using RCS when you're trying to do pretty precise burns like this, because you can see even the torque is changing the delta V that I have to use to get into that orbit, since it's such a small distance. It's probably some sort of like floating point error or something, but if you use RCS, it's even worse, because RCS is actually thrusting to change your attitude. So we're coming up on this burn. It doesn't say a given burn time, that's or an estimated burn time. That's probably because it's going to be such a small burn with this big engine. But I can guess it's probably going to be about a 1 second burn. It's only 14.5 meters per second delta V. Yeah, fast forward a little bit here. And we will burn. And that's going to probably be pretty good. Yep, that's pretty good. Alright. Take off that maneuver node, and you can see that on the other side of our orbit, it's kind of oscillating a little bit. I think because of the RCS, or the ACS, yeah. So you can see that when we come around our orbit, our separation from the target is only going to be about 30 kilometers, which is pretty darn good. So we're actually going to switch our nav ball by clicking on this part to target. And that's going to show our relative velocity to the target. It's also going to show, you can see the one that I'm on right now is the the vector that points towards the target craft. So if you look off in that direction, you can see that that's our target craft off about 80 kilometers in the distance. Way down in the corner, you can see that prograde marker. That's not your actual prograde marker. That's going to be your prograde marker to target. So that's our velocity direction in relation to the target. So once we get around to the other side of the orbit, we're going to want to zero that out, which is going to mean burning towards the retrograde marker. You can see that as we're going around, our orbit is getting closer and closer and closer to the target orbit, as we are also getting closer and closer and closer to the target itself. And we're kind of, at this point, almost like slipping behind it in orbit, but that's completely fine. So we get to this closest point, and after this point, we're pretty much going to be turning away from the target, so we really don't want that. I'm going to flip around and try to find where the heck that retrograde marker went. It's probably going to be 180 degrees from there, which is going to be this way. There it is. Alright. I'm probably wasting tons of RCS fuel right now. So we're going to stabilize on that point and turn RCS off because it's wiggling way too much, and we're going to burn retrograde, and you're just going to see our velocity relative to the target is going down very quickly because of this huge engine that we're using, but that's fine. We're going to want to chase that retrograde marker as it turns, kind of catch up with it a little bit. You can see that right now our velocity with respect to the target is only about 6 meters per second. Let me just speed up a little bit. I want to get it as close to 0 as possible, pretty much just zero it out. Get along, little pony. Alright. And that's pretty good. Down about 1 meter per second. So you can see that our orbit is kind of been shifted over, and it's cutting off, it's kind of taking a shortcut around the other orbit. So what we want to do right now is change. You can see that that's our distance pointed away, or our vector pointed away from the target. I'm going to switch over to that one that we saw before, which is our direction towards the target, which is this round one right here. Get a lock onto that, and we're going to just burn towards it so that we can get some velocity going towards the target. You can see that our prograde marker is burning towards there. I'm going to stop it at about 100 meters per second, and you can see that we are going about a 1/10 of a kilometer per second towards it. So we're going to speed up just a little bit. You can see that it's getting closer and closer. You can see the sort of debris cloud that I've got following the space station from the pieces that separated, but that's fine. I think one of them is probably a stack separator, the other one's the actual launch vehicle. And if you want to see on the map, you can actually see where our closest point is going to be, which is coming up. It's going to be about 18 kilometers, so you can actually fast forward to that spot if you want. You're going to want to stop before it because you need enough time to maneuver around and kill out your velocity again. And you're pretty much just going to follow this step-by-step process over and over again until you are more or less matched up in orbit to the target. So we're going to go find the retrograde marker again. It's probably going to be this way. And we're going to burn towards it to nullify that 100 meters per second velocity towards the target, because you can see that we're not exactly moving towards the target. And stop. See, that RCS is just going crazy. Alright, so we got just about 0 velocity. Turn out that ASAS. Oh my gosh. Alright. So we're just going to want to do the same thing again. Point towards the target, that round purple pinkish marker there, and get some velocity towards the target. And you're just going to keep doing that. Keep doing that over and over and over again. If your orbit is high, you don't really have to worry about where the atmosphere is, but if you say have a space station that's about, 80 kilometers or so, that little cutting off, lowering maneuver is going to skim pretty close to the atmosphere if you're not careful, so you got to be careful about that. In my little personal save file that I don't really use for my LP at all, my space station is about an 85 kilometer orbit, and that's something that I kind of have to be careful about. So we're going to do another burn, maybe a little bit slower this time, keep it at about 60 meters per second. As you get closer and closer, you're obviously going to want to do things slower and slower and slower so you don't fly by or collide with the thing that you're trying to rendezvous with. That's slowly creeping up on us. I'm going to take this opportunity while we're waiting to maneuver the spacecraft back around. I could be using RCS fuel right now because I've actually got quite a lot of it. You can see that I'm using MechJeb right now, which is what's draining my power, but I'm not actually using MechJeb. I just like the information it gives you. It tells you how much delta V you've got left, what your thrust to weight ratio is. If you have a target, it tells you all the orbital information of the target. I haven't really used it. You can see there in the use RCS here. You can see during the launch that I didn't even use the ascent autopilot. The ascent autopilot, if you don't tweak it to each spacecraft, doesn't usually take a like an optimal launch curve. See how close we are. We're getting in within 10 kilometers, so we're getting close. It's going to start to get to the point where we can actually see the target. At some point, I'm just going to jettison this launch vehicle and just use RCS because it gets to the point where the adjustments that you're going to be making, even just like forwards and backwards, like on-axis thrusting, is going to be so tiny that you're going to want to use RCS for it anyway. So you can use like H and N on the default linear control method, and that will give you forwards and backwards thrust just like an engine would. I hate that oscillation that causes. That's one of my pet peeves, is that the default ASAS is not a very good control system. It's what's called a proportional integral and derivative control system, and the constants that they put on it by default are just not very good. I'm not like criticizing Squat because it's a decent little autopilot, but you end up like any craft that can shake like that, it just ends up oscillating and wiggling back and forth. And obviously, like a lot of people have noticed on launches, you can have a spacecraft that's controlled by ASAS just shake itself apart for no real reason. If you were doing it yourself, you wouldn't shake the spacecraft apart just to keep it straight. But you can actually go into the part menu and change the ASAS constants and gains to what you want them to be. Kind of tweak it so that you avoid overshoot and you decrease the settling time and stuff. But if you mess with your part files at all, it'll just go back to the default value. Like if you accidentally like overwrite the parts when you do an update. Alright, so we're gonna burn towards this again. I'm probably gonna do, I want to say about 20 meters per second. I just kind of like to decrement it each time by about the same value. So that should be good. Fast forward a little bit. Fast forward a little bit more. Make sure my orbit's okay. Yeah, see, because my orbit's I can get closer and closer to the target orbit to make these corrections. And there, whoa. I almost just, you can see it. You can actually see it off in the distance. Pretty exciting. I'm gonna turn around. Actually, I think I'm gonna, at this point, jettison the launch vehicle. There we go. And now I'm just gonna use RCS to do all these, RCS and torque to do all these maneuvers. I'm gonna point retrograde and use the H key to, whoops, I don't even have RCS on. Use the H key to zero out my velocity. You can see it does it a lot slower, but it also allows you to do finer tuning. You gotta be really careful once you start to get this close, because you can really easily, I mean, I realize that space is huge, but you can really easily, especially if you find that you have that prograde vector exactly on the towards target vector, you can really easily smash into whatever you're trying to rendezvous with. So now we're at 350 meters. You can see it off in the distance. We're gonna find that. Actually, at this point with RCS on, you don't even really need to flip the spacecraft around to find that that towards the craft vector to point towards. You can just use the N key and provide some reverse thrust. So you can reverse thrust towards the away vector, and it's the same thing as forward thrusting towards the towards vector, if that makes any sense. So like right now I can stay locked on to this towards vector slash prograde vector, since they're pretty much the same right now, and just hit N instead of H and it'll cancel out my velocity. Let me slow down. Getting kind of scary close here. Slow down. Basically right now I'm just hitting N. And now we're going at about half a meter per second. ASAS is really key to this. If you don't have ASAS, it becomes really difficult to fine-tune everything. Also, at this point, I think I'm going to put on caps lock, which is the fine control. Also, what I'm going to want to do is, you can, now that I can see the spacecraft, you can pick out what node you want to, what docking piece you want to dock to. Right click on it and say set as target. So now it's not the center of the mass that I'm targeted on of the target spacecraft, it's the actual node. As you get closer, that becomes very important. So I'm gonna lock onto that again and kind of thrust towards it very slowly. At this point, you're gonna want your velocities to be, you know, meters per second, less than a meter per second, if you have the patience. Just make sure you don't say, let's say, slam into solar panels. So we're getting closer. I actually have, if you can see it, this bottom, one targeted. I should need to kind of maneuver around towards my prograde vector and thrust away from it. There we go. And at this point, I'm going to switch to chase view. So I'm going to hit V. That's orbital view. Hit V again. Now I'm in chase view, and that actually will align the camera to. Let me actually put my solar panels out. I'm probably actually creating a problem for myself because the solar panels are going to get in the way, but actually, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to retract that. Because the solar panels really just get in the way. I really don't even need to have the solar panels on the target spacecraft. But, alright, so right now I can press, if I'm aligned this way, I can press I. And you can see that that pushes me down. If I press K, I know that's going to push me up. I press J, I know that's going to push me to the right. To the left is L. That's a little bit reverse, like I can go this way and switch everything up, but chase view really keeps that orientation on the spacecraft rather than any sort of like outside reference frame. So what I'm going to do right now is thrust this way so that I can kind of maneuver myself back around, because I'm targeting this far docking piece right there. Cancel out that velocity that I had, hopefully. Alright, and I'm also going to switch around. You can see that the camera follows the spacecraft and not any outside reference frame like the center of my orbit or anything like that. Alright, and so now I'm going to kind of align the spacecraft this way, and I'm just using the rotational controls for this right now. And I'm going to be pointed, I'm pretty sure that I still have this this space station pointed, make sure that I'm not too far forward. I have the spacecraft, or the space station itself, I have that pointed north, so I'm pointed south right now on my spacecraft, and that lets me know pretty much exactly what direction I need to be pointed in. Hit I there. What direction I need to be pointed in to align. That's a really good point, which is you need to be putting, you can see I've got the ASAS piece somewhere around here. ASAS piece on the spacecraft that I'm trying to dock to. That's really helpful because you can have it on a set heading, and then you can just align your like active spacecraft to that heading. So I'm just moving it over. You can use the docking mode if you want, and that'll basically switch the rotational controls that you usually use, WAS, D, Q, and E, with the translational controls, which are I, J, K, L, H, and N. But I honestly, I'm so used to doing it this way. I don't do it that I don't use docking mode at this point. But if you need to use it, if it makes it more intuitive for you, then obviously feel free. If you have any methods that work differently from the way that I do it, then you really should do it that way, because the easier the better. So now I'm pretty much got my my direction set more or less right on the docking node that I want to get to. So I'm going to hit H to go forward, not too fast, especially at this distance. Patience is a virtue. We're just going to keep going forward. And there's actually a little bit of magnetism once they get close enough. I'm not aligned well enough right now, but once they get close enough, they'll kind of magnet together from about, I don't know, a 1 meter distance or so. So I'm just going to slow down once I get close enough. I need to align it better. So I need to move this way, to the left, and up a little bit. And then cancel that motion out. Obviously, if you've been playing KSP for a while, you know your physics pretty well, but for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So if you move in one direction, you're going to need to kill your velocity in the other direction in order to do it. And you can see that it just kind of smushes together at that point without me really even doing anything, and it should dock any second, and you'll kind of see a perspective change when that happens. Maybe it's not going to. Let me turn ASAS off. Yeah. And there we go. You see the camera view change. So now we're docked. This entire thing is one spacecraft. We can right click on it and rename the spacecraft Space Station Hubbo. Oops, got caps lock on. Space Station Hubbo. And we'll call it a station. So now this entire thing, if we look on the map, is a station. I've still got a little bit of debris following me, but there we go. I can extend these panels out finally without worrying about bumping. And that's really it. So you just the basic algorithm is get in that lower orbit, and then once you're close, or it could even be a higher orbit. I keep saying lower orbit, and I didn't a lower orbit this time. But if your target is behind you in its orbit, then you can launch into a higher orbit, and it will catch up with you in the same way that we just caught up with the space station hub. But you get into that orbit that'll let you sync up your orbital phase, it's called, and it being the same phase point, same phase angle in your orbit. And then you have to do, if your inclination's different, at some point you're going to want to match those inclinations. You already know how to do that. And then after that, it's just a matter of doing another burn to kind of like that Holman transfer burn to make your orbit an ellipse that'll connect up with the target orbit, and then from there it's just switching it to target mode, and then canceling out your velocity with respect to the target, burning towards the target, canceling out your velocity again, and burning towards the target, canceling out your velocity again, and it'll get you closer and closer and closer until you're at a point where it's really just basically using those RCS thrusters to get close enough. So you can see, actually I've got this this node here that I forgot to, I used the decoupler instead of the node, but you can see that if I decouple that node, it just goes flying off. So now I've got, that would have gone flying off with my launch vehicle, but now it's going flying off on its own. So now I've got another end of this that can be connected now. And then obviously I've got all these docking pieces connected to the actual hub, and you could, you know, fit pieces in there. But whatever, now we've got Phil Top, Deslo, Bob, And I thought there were more Kerbans, but there should have been. They probably disappeared. They're all happy, yet terrified. I hope you learned something from this video. If you have any questions, feel free to comment. If you like this video, feel free to hit like. And if you want to see more videos in the future, feel free to hit subscribe. Thanks for watching. Bye.